What? You've had the divorce papers ready this whole time? That's low, even for you, but it doesn't matter because I'm not afraid. Troy sat across from me in our cozy apartment, his eyes cold and unyielding. He always had a way of making everything feel like my fault. His voice dripped with smugness as he spoke. Casey, it's simple. You either quit your job and take care of my father, or we're done. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Troy, I can't just give up my life. I love my job and you already know that. Why can't we find another way to take care of Dan? His gaze hardened. You don't get it, do you? This is about family. My dad needs you, and you owe it to us to be there for him. I leaned back, the weight of his words pressing down on me. This was the man I married, the one I once thought I'd spend forever with. But now I was seeing the manipulative tactics right in front of me. No, Troy, I said firmly. I don't owe him my career. He scoffed, standing up and stepping closer. You wouldn't understand loyalty if it hit you in the face, Casey. Before I could retort, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Jenna, my older sister. Thinking of you. Call me if you need to talk. Perfect timing, as usual. Knowing that Jenna had my back gave me a small ounce of strength to stand my ground. I looked Troy in the eyes, taking a deep breath. You can't force me into this corner. This isn't how a marriage works. You say that, but look at where we are, Troy retorted. Dan's health is declining, and you don't even care. It's pathetic. I felt my hands clench into fists. I care about Dan, but I also care about my own life. I won't let you dictate my decisions. Troy shook his head, turning away. You'll regret this, Casey. Mark my words. Later that evening, Jenna came over. As soon as she walked in, she gave me a knowing look. He's pushing you again, isn't he? Yes, I admitted, sinking into the couch. This time, it's about quitting my job. He wants me to take care of Dan full-time. Jenna sat down next to me, her hand on my shoulder. You can't let him control you, Casey. You've worked too hard to get where you are. I sighed. I know, but it's not easy. Every step I take, he's there, pushing back. Listen, Jenna said firmly, don't lose yourself in this. If Troy really loved you, he wouldn't be making these demands. Her words struck a chord, a realization I had been avoiding for too long. You're right. I need to think about what's best for me, too. We spent the rest of the evening talking, the reality of my situation sinking in deeper with every word exchanged. Jenna's unwavering support was the anchor I desperately needed. After she left, I sat in the living room, replaying the day's events in my mind. Troy had shown his true colors, and I knew I had to prepare for what was coming next. No matter how hard it would be, I couldn't let him win. The next Saturday came faster than I had hoped, and soon enough, Troy and I were pulling up to his parents' house. Stepping out of the car, I could feel the tension build in my shoulders. Jenna's words were still fresh in my mind, but this was a different battlefield. Casey, do try to smile, Troy said, unlocking the front door, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We don't need your attitude today. I followed him inside, biting back a retort. Dan greeted us in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. Troy, Casey, nice to see you both. His eyes bore into mine, a subtle challenge. We made our way to the dining table, Troy's mother bustling around the kitchen. The small talk was as strained as ever, with Troy playing the charming son. But as the meal progressed, Dan's real agenda began to surface. So Casey, Dan began, setting his fork down. How's work? Must be hard balancing everything with Troy and, well, potential future responsibilities. I forced a smile, swallowing my irritation. Work's been good, thank you. Busy but fulfilling. Dan nodded, a knowing glint in his eye. I see. You know, family is important. Troy's mother and I have always put family first, no matter the sacrifices. Troy shot me a glance, urging me to respond appropriately. I cleared my throat. I understand, Dan, and I care about family too, but sometimes it's okay to find a balance. Oh, balance, Dan chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. Sometimes that's just an excuse to avoid hard choices. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Sometimes hard choices are necessary, I replied, keeping my voice steady, but they shouldn't require losing yourself in the process. Troy jumped in, clearly trying to steer the conversation. Casey's always been passionate about her work. Maybe she can find a way to balance both, Dad. Dan leaned back, giving Troy a nod. Sure, but passions can change, especially when love and duty call. Just a thought, Casey. The rest of the meal was spent in a blur of forced conversations and thinly veiled comments. By the time we left, my head was pounding from the effort of maintaining my composure. Once we were in the car, Troy's mask dropped. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" he spat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "My father was trying to have a conversation, and you just had to challenge him." "I was standing up for myself," I shot back. "You can't expect me to agree with everything blindly. You're so stubborn, Casey. This is why we're having problems. You don't respect my family." I let out a bitter laugh. "Respect goes both ways, Troy, and I'm done being the one who always bends." The drive home was silent, the air thick with unspoken resentment. Inside my mind, Jenna's warning rang clear: don't lose yourself. The cracks in our facade were widening, and I knew this was just the beginning. At home, I finally broke the silence. "Troy, this isn't how a marriage should be. We need to figure something out." He didn't look at me as he headed to the bedroom, his voice cold. "Figure it out yourself, Casey. I've done my part." Staring at the closed door, I realized Jenna was right. Troy and his father wouldn't stop until they had full control, and as I stood alone in the living room, I made a silent vow: I would fight back, no matter the cost. It was late on a Wednesday evening, and the living room felt like a battlefield as I faced Troy. I had just come home from work, barely managing to keep my composure after another intense meeting with my team. But it seemed Troy had other plans for tonight. "You haven't actually considered quitting, have you?" he started, his voice mocking. "It's like you don't care about us or my father at all." I dropped my keys on the table, not ready to entertain another of his guilt trips. "We had this conversation, Troy. My job is important to me. Besides, there are other ways to support your father." His eyes narrowed, the tension in the room thickening. "Casey, let me make this clear. Either you quit your job and start being a proper daughter-in-law, or this marriage is over." I blinked, the weight of his ultimatum hitting me like a freight train. "You can't be serious. You're choosing this moment to push me?" He stepped closer, his tone menacing. "I'm absolutely serious. It's time you pick your career or our family." I felt a surge of anger rising. Since when did being part of this family mean sacrificing everything I've worked for? You can't just demand that I give up my entire life. "You're being selfish, Casey. My father's health is deteriorating, and you're thinking about your career?" He shook his head. "You've changed." I crossed my arms, standing my ground. "Maybe I have, but I'm not going to lose myself just to fit into your mold." He sneered, exasperation evident on his face. "If you won't do this for my father, what guarantee do I have that you even care about this marriage?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "What marriage, Troy? The one where you lord every decision over me, where your father's opinions matter more than my own? That's not a marriage. It's control." The room fell silent, the walls closing in on us as the reality of our situation sank in. Troy's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You have till the end of the month to decide, Casey. If you haven't quit by then, don't expect to find me here." I swallowed hard, unable to believe the person in front of me was the same man I once loved. He stormed off, slamming the bedroom door behind him, leaving me standing alone in the fallout. Later, I called Jenna, my fingers trembling as I dialed. She picked up quickly. "Hey, Casey, everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, it's not. Troy gave me an ultimatum tonight. Quit my job or he's leaving." "Oh, Casey?" Jenna sighed. "That's a terrible position to be in. What are you going to do?" I paced the living room, trying to steady my thoughts. "I don't know, Jenna, but I can't let him force me into this. I need to stand up for myself." "Absolutely, you do," Jenna replied, her voice a firm anchor in the chaos. "We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this." After we hung up, I sat on the couch, my determination growing stronger by the minute. The next steps wouldn't be easy, but with Jenna by my side, I knew I'd find a way to reclaim my life. The lines had been drawn, and the battle was just beginning. The following weeks felt like a balancing act on a thin wire. I buried myself in work during the daytime, finding solace in my projects and the camaraderie of my colleagues. But the nights were a different story. Troy's silent treatment was a continuous reminder of the storm brewing overhead. One evening, after sending off a final project email, I made my way home, feeling a knot in my stomach. Stepping through the door, I could hear Troy on the phone in the next room. He was laughing, a sound that felt foreign in our current reality. "Yeah, it should be finalized soon. Once it is, everything will be set. Troy's voice carried a confidence I hadn't heard in a while. My curiosity piqued, and I edged closer to the door, trying to pick up more. "Don't worry, Dad," Troy continued. "Once Casey is out of the picture, we'll have complete control over the finances and everything else. She won't know what hit her." My breath caught in my throat. What was he talking about? And then it hit me. Something was seriously wrong. I backed away quietly and waited until Troy hung up. When he emerged from the room, he barely looked at me. "I'm going for a walk," I said, grabbing my coat. He just nodded, disinterested. As soon as I was outside, I dialed Jenna. "We have a bigger problem than I thought," I said the moment she picked up. I overheard Troy on the phone with his dad. "They're planning something, and it involves our finances." "Calm down, Casey. What did you hear exactly?" Jenna's voice was calm, yet urgent. "They're planning to cut me out somehow. Troy mentioned finalizing something and gaining control once I'm out of the picture. Jenna, I need to find out what they're up to." "All right, get home safely, and we'll figure this out together. First, check Troy's emails or any documents he might be hiding. We need proof." Back at home, I waited until Troy was asleep before starting my search. Navigating through his laptop, I stumbled upon an email chain that seemed suspicious. The heading read, "Financial Adjustments." Clicking through, my heart sank further with each line I read. Transactions, account details, highly confidential terms. It all pointed to Troy lying about his job promotion and covertly using my income to fund a joint account with Dan. With shaking hands, I printed out the emails. This was exactly the kind of evidence Jenna and I needed. As I gathered the papers, feelings of betrayal and anger fused into a resolve. The next morning, I met Jenna at a nearby coffee shop. "You won't believe what I found," I said, handing her the printed emails. Her eyes scanned the pages quickly. "This is unbelievable, Casey. They're clearly planning to cut you off financially and leave you with nothing. We need a plan." "I won't let them destroy everything we've built," I replied firmly. "We have to find more proof, something that directly ties them to this scheme." Jenna nodded. "We need to be smart about this. Let's gather as much evidence as we can and ensure it's irrefutable." Leaving the coffee shop, a sense of dread mingled with newfound determination. This was just the beginning, but I wouldn't back down. Troy and his father had underestimated me, and they were about to learn a hard lesson. With Jenna by my side, I was ready to take the fight to them. It was time to turn the tables, no matter what it took. Dinner at Troy's parents' house felt tense, like we were all actors in a badly written play. Dan sat at the head of the table, a smug look on his face, while Troy played the dutiful son. I felt like I was being scrutinized from all angles. As expected, Dan started with the subtle digs. "So, Casey, how's the job going? Must be quite demanding with everything else on your plate." I smiled politely, feeling the dagger in his words. "It's busy but rewarding, thank you for asking." Troy chimed in, his voice sickeningly sweet. "You know, Casey's been considering some changes, maybe spending more time with us, right, dear?" I forced myself to keep calm. "Nothing's been decided yet, Troy. I'm still weighing my options." Dan's eyes glinted with hidden menace. "I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Family should always come first." In the middle of the meal, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. The plan Jenna and I had cooked up was playing out in my mind. I pulled out my phone and turned on the recording app, slipping it into my purse before heading back to the dining room. My heart pounded with anticipation. When I sat back down, Dan leaned towards Troy, his voice dropping just low enough to think I wouldn't hear. "She's too stubborn, Troy. We need to tighten the reins, remind her who's in control." Troy nodded, his face a mask of concern. "I know, Dad, I'll handle it. She'll fall in line, just like always. We'll make sure of it." My stomach churned, but I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. Jenna was right. We needed more than just suspicion. We needed undeniable proof. As dinner wrapped up, Dan placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Remember, Casey, we're all family here. Sometimes sacrifices need to be made for the greater good." I managed a tight smile, the weight of his touch disgusting me. "Of course, Dan, I understand." Once we were in the car driving home, Troy's false kindness disappeared. "You didn't have to be so cold tonight," he snapped. "My father was trying to be nice." I didn't trust myself to respond without revealing my plan, so I stared out the window, keeping my silence. When we got home, Troy went straight to bed, leaving me alone to review the recording. In the quiet of the living room, I plugged my phone into my laptop and played back the recording. Hearing Dan's manipulation and Troy's compliance felt like a knife turning in my gut. The next day I met Jenna again. Dana and Troy practically laid out their plans over dinner, I said, playing her the recording on my phone. Jenna's eyes widened as she listened. This is it, Casey. This is the proof we need. Now we have to act smart. We can't let them find out that we know. I nodded. We need to build a strong case, something they can't weasel out of. Exactly, Jenna agreed. Now's the time to gather everything and be meticulous. We only get one shot at this. Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The tides were turning. For every lie and manipulation, Troy and Dan would pay. And as I gripped my purse tighter, I knew that I had just taken the first big step in reclaiming my life. There would be more battles ahead, but I was ready. The game had changed, and now I held the cards. A few evenings later, I sat in the living room, waiting for Troy to come home. The envelope containing the truth lay on the coffee table in front of me, daring me to turn this moment into a confrontation. The recording device in my purse was my secret weapon. The door creaked open, and Troy walked in, noticeably weary. Casey, he greeted, a forced warmth in his voice. Troy, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but stern. He narrowed his eyes, sensing the shift in my demeanor. What about? I reached for the envelope but kept my eyes on him. About us. About what kind of marriage this really is. He scoffed, dropping his bag onto a chair. I've been telling you that for weeks, Casey. Why the sudden urge to talk now? I stood up, placing the envelope in his hands. Open it. Troy looked skeptical but tore into the envelope. As he read the printed emails and transcripts, his face twisted into a mask of anger and disbelief. Where did you get this? I found it, Troy. I know you've been lying about your promotion and using my income for your secret plans with Dan, I said, holding my ground. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. You've been spying on me? How dare you? Yes, I have, I replied, unwavering. And I've discovered what you and your father have been plotting all along. You can't gaslight me anymore. Troy's face flared red with rage. This means nothing. No one will believe you over me. Let's see you try to use this against me. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. I don't need to try. I've recorded everything, including your little chat with Dan during dinner. I played back the crucial part of the recording, watching as Troy's confidence melted into panic. He lunged at me, trying to grab the phone, but I was quicker. I stepped back, keeping it out of his reach. This is who you are, Troy. This is the man I married, I stated, my voice cold and resolute. You manipulated me, tried to control me, but it's over now. He was breathing heavily, struggling to regain control. You think you're so smart, Casey. Doing this won't end well for you. I raised an eyebrow. It's already over. I'll be leaving, and I'm taking this to a lawyer. You can explain to them and everyone else why you and your father felt the need to set me up. For a moment, he looked like he might hit me, but then he deflated, the color draining from his face. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice trembling. No, Troy. The mistake was thinking you could control and deceive me without any consequences, I replied, turning away from him. I took my keys, picked up my pre-packed bag, and walked out the door without looking back. This was the end of a painful chapter, but the beginning of my fight for justice and freedom. Driving to Jenna's, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I was taking control of my life, and with Jenna's support, I had the strength to face whatever came next. Arriving at Jenna's doorstep, I rang the bell. She opened the door, and the sight of my sister's reassuring smile brought tears to my eyes. It's done, I whispered, feeling a wave of relief crash over me. Jenna said, hugging me tightly. You did it, Casey. Now let's make sure he pays for everything. As we walked inside, I realized I was no longer alone in this fight. With the truth on my side and Jenna by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. The battle had just begun, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. A week had passed since I confronted Troy. I had moved in with Jenna, and with her support, we planned our next steps meticulously. My lawyer had all the emails and recordings. The legal wheels were in motion. That morning, Jenna and I sat at her kitchen table, finalizing the details. "Casey, here are the divorce papers," she said, sliding them across the table. "All you have to do is sign." I picked up the pen, my hand shaking slightly. This was it, the final push to sever all ties with Troy. I took a deep breath and signed my name, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Good," Jenna nodded. "Now, we just need to ensure he gets these and understands he has no way out." I packed my belongings with Jenna's help, making sure I left nothing behind. We loaded everything into her car and drove to my former home. The plan was simple: deliver the divorce papers and recording, and then walk away for good. When we arrived, Troy's car was in the driveway. My heart pounded as I stepped out, clutching the envelope. I steeled myself, walking to the front door. Jenna followed, ready to support me if needed. I knocked, and after a tense moment, Troy opened the door. His face turned pale when he saw me. "Casey, what do you want?" "I'm here to finalize things," I replied, holding out the envelope. "Divorce papers? It's over about Troy." He took the envelope, his hands trembling. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said firmly. "Inside, you'll also find a copy of the recording and the emails. You cannot threaten or manipulate me anymore." Troy's facade crumbled. "Casey, please, we can talk about this. We can fix things." "There's nothing left to fix, Troy," I replied, my voice unwavering. "You broke this marriage with your deceit and manipulation. This is the end." For a moment, he looked desperate, his eyes searching for a way to regain control. But there was nothing left for him to grasp. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice cracking. "You'll end up alone." "I'd rather be alone than stay in a toxic relationship," I shot back. "Goodbye, Troy." Turning on my heel, I walked away, Jenna matching my stride. We got back into the car, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It's done," I said quietly. Jenna reached over, squeezing my hand. "You did the right thing, Casey. Now let's get you home." Back at Jenna's, we sat in her living room, a sense of relief mingling with the anticipation of what was to come. "So what's next?" Jenna asked gently. "I start over," I replied, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift from my shoulders. "I focus on my job, my life, and what makes me happy. I won't let Troy's actions define me anymore." Jenna smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You're stronger than you think, Casey, and remember, you're not alone in this." "Thanks, Jenna, for everything," I said, hugging her tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you." "That's what sisters are for," she replied, holding me close. As we settled in for the evening, a sense of calm washed over me. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it was mine to shape and control. And with Jenna by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The fight was far from over, but I was ready. Starting now, I would rebuild my life on my terms, free from manipulation and deceit. If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and rage as I stared into the cold, unforgiving eyes of my husband, Derek. His fist clenched at his side, knuckles white with fury, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me again. But then, a twisted smile spread across his lips, and he let out a low, menacing chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can threaten me, Mallory?" He spat, taking a step closer. "You're nothing without me. You'd be lost, alone, and penniless if it weren't for my generosity." I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill down my cheeks. This wasn't the first time Derek had lashed out at me, but it was the first time I dared to stand up to him. For too long, I'd been trapped in this gilded cage, blinded by the illusion of the perfect life we'd built together. From the outside, we were the picture of success. A powerful business mogul and his doting wife raising our beautiful daughter, Ava, in a sprawling mansion in the heart of the city. But behind closed doors, Derek's true nature revealed itself, a toxic blend of manipulation and control that had slowly isolated me from my friends and family. "I'm warning you, Derek," I said, my voice quivering despite my best efforts to sound strong. "If you ever touch me or Ava again, I'll leave, and I'll make sure you never find us." His eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that familiar smirk that made my skin crawl. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, closing the distance between us. "You're mine, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave, I'll make sure you regret it." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs as the reality of my situation crashed down around me. I had to get out. For Ava's sake, and for my own. But how? Derek had made it clear that he wouldn't let us go without a fight, and I knew firsthand how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. As the tears streamed down my face, I silently vowed to find a way. No matter what it took, I would break free from Derek's grip and build a life for Ava and myself, far away from his toxic influence. It was time to stop living in fear and take back control of my life. The next few days were a blur of tension and unease. Derek's outburst had shaken me to my core, but I knew I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to act, for Ava's sake, if not my own. As I went about my daily routine, I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every movement in my peripheral vision. Derek, for his part, seemed to revel in my discomfort, shooting me smug glances whenever our paths crossed. "Mom, are you okay?" Ava asked one evening as we sat down for dinner, her brow furrowed with concern. "You've been acting really weird lately." I forced a smile, reaching across the table to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little stressed at work, that's all." Derek scoffed, shaking his head. "Your mother's always been a worrier, Ava. It's nothing new." His words cut deep, but I bit my tongue, unwilling to provoke another confrontation in front of our daughter. Instead, I turned my attention back to Ava, determined to keep our conversation light and casual. But as the days wore on, it became increasingly difficult to maintain the facade. Derek's verbal jabs grew more frequent, more pointed, and I found myself constantly on the defensive, struggling to keep my composure. It all came to a head one night after Ava had gone to bed. Derek and I were alone in the living room, and he wasted no time in launching into another tirade. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you?" he sneered, his words slurred from the countless glasses of scotch he'd downed. "You think you're better than me, but you're nothing without my money and my name." "That's not true," I protested, my voice trembling. "I've worked just as hard as you have to build this life for our family." He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "You're delusional, Mallory. You're nothing but a pretty face, a trophy wife to hang on my arm and make me look good." Before I could react, he was on his feet, towering over me with a look of pure rage twisting his features. "Maybe I need to remind you of your place," he growled, raising his hand as if to strike me. I flinched, bracing myself for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Derek stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance as he glared at me with a mixture of contempt and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "You're pathetic," he spat, turning on his heel and storming out of the room, leaving me shaken and wondering how much longer I could endure this living hell. As I sat there in the silence, my mind raced, trying to make sense of the turmoil that had become my life. I knew I had to get out, but the thought of leaving filled me with a paralyzing fear. What if Derek found us? What if he made good on his threats? I jumped as my phone buzzed, pulling me from my dark thoughts. It was a text from Samantha, my best friend and the only person I trusted enough to confide in. "Are you okay? I have a bad feeling about Derek. Please tell me you're safe." Tears stung my eyes as I read her words, a wave of relief washing over me. Samantha had always been my rock, my voice of reason in the darkest of times. Maybe, just maybe, she could help me find the strength to break free. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. "I need your help." Samantha's arrival was like a breath of fresh air. As soon as she stepped through the door, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the tension that had been coiling inside me for weeks finally beginning to unravel. "Oh, honey?" she murmured, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry you've been going through this alone." I clung to her, fighting back tears as the floodgates threatened to open. "I don't know what to do, Sam. He's become so volatile, so unpredictable. I'm scared for Ava and myself." She pulled back, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You're going to leave him. That's what you're going to do." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Leave Derek? The thought had crossed my mind more times than I could count, but the fear of his retaliation had always held me back. "I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "You know how vindictive he can be. If I try to leave, he'll make our lives a living hell." Samantha's grip on my shoulders tightened, her gaze unwavering. Mallory, listen to me. You are stronger than this. You have to be strong, for Ava's sake, if not your own. Derek is a monster, and you can't let him control you any longer. Her words struck a chord deep within me, igniting a spark of defiance that I thought had long since been extinguished. She was right. I couldn't let Derek continue to hold this power over me, over our family. Okay, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. Okay, I'll do it. I'll leave him. Samantha's face broke into a relieved smile, and she pulled me into another fierce hug. Thank God. We'll figure this out, Mal. I promise. You and Ava are going to be safe. Over the next few days, we hatched our plan. Samantha helped me open a secret bank account, squirreling away as much money as I could without arousing Derek's suspicion. We researched safe houses, potential places we could go to start over, far away from his reach. All the while, I walked on eggshells around Derek, careful not to give him any inkling of my intentions. But the strain was starting to show, and he grew increasingly suspicious of my behavior. What's going on with you lately? He demanded one night, cornering me in the kitchen. You've been acting strange, distant. I forced a smile, willing my hands not to tremble. It's nothing, Derek. I've just been stressed with work, that's all. His eyes narrowed and he took a step closer, backing me against the counter. Don't lie to me, Mallory. I know when you're hiding something. My heart pounded in my chest as he leaned in, his breath hot on my face. If I find out you're up to something, you'll regret it. Do you understand? I nodded mutely, too terrified to speak. Derek held my gaze for a few more agonizing seconds before turning and stalking out of the room, leaving me shaken to my core. As soon as he was gone, I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands as the sobs racked my body. How much longer could I keep this up? How much longer before Derek saw through my lies and unleashed his fury upon us? I knew then that I had to act fast. Our lives depended on it. It all came crashing down one fateful night. I should have been more careful, more vigilant, but in my desperation to gather enough funds for our escape, I grew careless. I had just returned from a clandestine meeting with Samantha, slipping the latest cash withdrawal into the hidden compartment in my closet, when I heard the unmistakable sound of Derek's footsteps approaching. My heart dropped into my stomach as he flung open the bedroom door, his face contorted with rage. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled envelope, one of the many I had used to squirrel away our escape money. "What is this?" he snarled, brandishing the envelope like a weapon. "What the hell have you been up to, Mallory?" I froze, my mind racing as I scrambled for an excuse, any lie that might defuse the situation. But Derek was having none of it. In a flash, he crossed the room and yanked open the closet door, his eyes widening as he discovered the hidden stash of cash. "You lying bitch," he growled, whirling on me with a look of pure fury. "You were planning to leave me, weren't you?" I tried to speak, to explain, but the words caught in my throat as Derek advanced on me, his fists clenched at his sides. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "You ungrateful whore." Before I could react, his hand lashed out, striking me across the face with such force that I stumbled backwards, stars dancing before my eyes. "Derek, please," I begged, tasting blood on my split lip. "I was only trying to protect Ava and myself. You've become so volatile, so abusive. I couldn't take it anymore." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse cross his features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that chilled me to the bone. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, grabbing a fistful of my hair and wrenching my head back. "You belong to me, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave again, I swear to God, I'll take everything from you, including Ava." The mention of our daughter's name sent a wave of panic crashing over me. I couldn't let him hurt her, not my sweet, innocent Ava. "Please, Derek," I sobbed, clawing at his iron grip. "Don't bring her into this. She's just a child." He let out a cruel laugh, his grip tightening until I thought my scalp might tear. "She's my child too, Mallory. And if you think you can take her away from me, you're sorely mistaken." With a final, vicious yank, he released me, sending me crumpling to the floor in a heap. As I lay there, cradling my throbbing head, I knew in that moment that our lives were in grave danger. We had to get out, and fast, before Derek's rage spiraled out of control. Because this time, I feared there would be no coming back. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. As soon as Derek stormed out of the bedroom, I sprang into action, my mind laser-focused on one goal: getting Ava and myself out of that house before it was too late. I scrambled to gather our essentials: a few changes of clothes, our passports, and the meager stash of cash I had managed to squirrel away before Derek discovered my plan. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough to get us started on our new life, wherever that may be. My hands trembled as I packed, my heart pounding in my chest with each passing minute. I knew Derek wouldn't be gone long, and when he returned, his fury would be tenfold. As if on cue, I heard the unmistakable sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel like a death knell. I had to move fast. Abandoning the half-packed bag, I raced down the hall to Ava's room, bursting through the door to find her sitting cross-legged on her bed, earbuds in and oblivious to the chaos unfolding around her. "Ava," I hissed, startling her from her reverie. "We have to go now." Her eyes widened, confusion and fear flickering across her delicate features. "Mom, what's going on? What's happening?" I grabbed her by the shoulders, my grip perhaps a little too tight as I fought to keep my panic at bay. "There's no time to explain. We have to leave before your father gets back. Our lives depend on it." She must have seen the desperation in my eyes, because she didn't argue or question me further. With a shaky nod, she rose from the bed and followed me back to the bedroom, where I hurriedly stuffed the last of our belongings into the bag. The sound of the front door slamming sent a jolt of terror through me, and I froze, my heart in my throat. "Mallory." Derek's voice boomed from downstairs, laced with a menacing fury that made my blood run cold. "Where the hell are you, you lying bitch?" Ava whimpered, her eyes wide with fear, and I knew we had to move, now or never. Slinging the bag over my shoulder, I grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the bedroom window, my mind racing as I formulated our escape route. "We're going out this way," I whispered, already working to pry open the stubborn pain. "There's a trellis on the side of the house. We can climb down and make a run for the car." Ava nodded, her face pale but resolute. In that moment, I saw a strength in her that I hadn't realized she possessed, a steely determination that filled me with equal parts pride and sorrow. No child should ever have to experience the horrors we had endured. With a final heave, the window gave way, and I ushered Ava through, following close behind, just as the sound of Derek's thunderous footsteps reached the top of the stairs. We moved quickly, silently, our hearts pounding in tandem as we shimmied down the trellis and hit the ground running. The car was just ahead, our salvation glinting in the moonlight like a beacon of hope. But as we neared it, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. "Derek? Going somewhere?" He sneered, his eyes glinting with a feral madness that sent chills down my spine. In that moment, time seemed to slow to a crawl. I could see the rage etched into every line of Derek's face, the hatred burning in his eyes as he stared us down like cornered prey. And in that moment, I knew. There was no going back. The days and weeks that followed our escape were a blur of constant motion, a never-ending cycle of fleeing and hiding. We couldn't risk staying in one place for too long, not with Derek's resources and his unquenchable thirst for revenge. Samantha had been our lifeline, our guardian angel in those early days. She helped us secure false identities, safe houses, and transportation as we hopscotched across the country, always one step ahead of Derek's hired goons. But the psychological toll of living in perpetual fear was immense. Ava, my once vibrant and carefree daughter, grew sullen and withdrawn, her eyes haunted by the horrors she had witnessed. And I, too, found myself jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Still, we persevered, driven by the knowledge that the alternative, falling back into Derek's clutches, was unthinkable. It was during one of our brief respites, holed up in a dingy motel on the outskirts of some nameless town, that the first crack in our defenses appeared. "Mom, how much longer are we going to have to keep running?" Ava asked, her voice small and defeated as she stared out the grimy window. I swallowed hard, my heart aching at the weariness etched into her young features. "As long as it takes, sweetheart, until we're sure your father can't find us." She turned to face me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But what if he never stops looking? What if we have to spend the rest of our lives like this, always running, always afraid. The questions hung heavy in the air, their weight crushing me under the weight of their implications. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Derek was a man possessed, and he would stop at nothing to track us down, to exact his twisted brand of revenge. "I don't know, Ava," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion, "but I promise you, we'll find a way to make it through this. Together." She nodded, but the spark of hope in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weary resignation that broke my heart. In that moment, I vowed to find a way to end this nightmare, once and for all. We couldn't go on living like this, constantly looking over our shoulders, our lives forever tainted by the specter of Derek's rage. It was time to take the fight to him. Over the next few weeks, I began to hatch a plan, reaching out to old contacts, calling in favors, and assembling a team of people I could trust to help bring Derek down. It was a risky gambit, but one I was willing to take if it meant finally securing our freedom. And then, just when I thought we had hit another dead end, a break in the case arrived in the form of an anonymous tip. Derek's location, his movements, his routine. It was the opportunity we had been waiting for, the chance to strike back and end this twisted game of cat and mouse once and for all. As I relayed the information to my team, a sense of grim determination settled over me. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. The showdown was inevitable, and only one of us would emerge victorious. I only hoped that when the dust settled, Ava and I would be the ones left standing. The safe house was a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, its weathered exterior belying the high-tech command center that lay within. As I stepped through the reinforced steel door, my heart was pounding in my chest, a heady mix of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through my veins. "You're sure about this, Mal?" Samantha's voice broke the tense silence, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt or hesitation. "There's no going back after tonight." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve as I gave her a curt nod. "I'm sure Derek has to be stopped once and for all, for Ava's sake, if not my own." She pursed her lips, clearly not thrilled with the plan, but respecting my decision nonetheless. "All right then, let's get this show on the road." Around us, the team of ex-military operatives and private investigators I had assembled sprang into action, checking weapons and running final system diagnostics. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what was to come hanging over us like a shroud. "We have eyes on the target," came a gruff voice from the comm station, shattering the silence. "He's just left his office and is en route to the rendezvous point." My breath caught in my throat as a grainy image of Derek flickered onto the main monitor. His face twisted into a scowl as he stalked towards his waiting car. Seeing him again, even through the distorted lens of a surveillance camera, sent a chill down my spine and reignited the smoldering embers of fear and rage that had burned within me for so long. "Remember, we need him alive," I reminded the team, my voice steadier than I felt. "At least for now, he has to face justice for what he's done." A chorus of grunts and nods met my words. The men and women around me hardened professionals who understood the gravity of the situation. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread that had taken root in the pit of my stomach. What if something went wrong? What if Derek managed to slip through our grasp once again, disappearing into the ether and leaving us to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives? I pushed the doubts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. This was our one shot, our chance to end this nightmare once and for all. Failure was not an option. The minutes ticked by like hours as we waited with bated breath, tracking Derek's movements on the monitors until finally the call came in. He's arrived at the rendezvous point, moving into position. My heart leapt into my throat as the team sprang into action, donning tactical gear and checking weapons one last time before filing out of the safe house and into the waiting armored vehicles. "Stay safe," Samantha murmured, pulling me into a fierce hug. "And give that bastard hell for me." I nodded, unable to find the words as a lump formed in my throat. This was it, the moment I had been both dreading and anticipating for what felt like an eternity. As the convoy roared to life and peeled out onto the deserted street, I found myself gripping the edge of the console, my knuckles white with tension. Every fiber of my being was focused on the mission, on the confrontation that was about to unfold. Derek's reign of terror was about to come to an end. One way or another, tonight would be the end of the road, and I would be the one to put the final nail in his coffin. The days and weeks following Derek's capture were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and the long, arduous process of picking up the pieces of our shattered lives. But through it all, a weight had been lifted, a burden that had pressed down on Ava and me for far too long. As the truth about Derek's abuse and his relentless pursuit of us came to light, the world seemed to hold its collective breath, transfixed by the sordid tale of a once powerful man brought low by his own monstrous actions. And while the court of public opinion was swift and merciless in its condemnation, it was the judicial system's reckoning that truly mattered. The trial was a grueling ordeal, with Derek's high-priced legal team doing everything in their power to cast doubt on our testimony and paint him as the victim. But in the end, the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern of abuse too well documented to be denied. When the guilty verdict was read, a hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the soft sound of Derek's sobs as he was led away in chains. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication, of justice finally being served after years of living in fear and torment. But more than that, I felt a profound sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in what felt like an eternity. In the days and weeks that followed, Ava and I began the slow process of rebuilding our lives, piece by shattered piece. It wasn't easy. The scars of our ordeal ran deep, both physical and emotional, but we were determined to forge ahead, to reclaim the happiness and sense of security that had been stolen from us for far too long. Samantha was a constant source of strength and support, her unwavering friendship a lifeline that helped us navigate the choppy waters of our newfound freedom. Together, we found a cozy little apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the opulent prison we had once called home. But to me, it was a palace, a sanctuary where we could finally let our guard down and begin to heal. As the months passed, I watched with a mixture of pride and wonder as Ava blossomed before my eyes, the shadows that had haunted her gaze gradually giving way to a newfound sense of joy and optimism. She threw herself into her studies, determined to make the most of the second chance we had been given, and I couldn't have been prouder of the strong, resilient young woman she was becoming. For my part, I found solace in the simple pleasures of life. Long walks in the park, lazy Sunday mornings spent curled up with a good book, and evenings spent laughing and reminiscing with Samantha over a bottle of wine. It was a far cry from the high-powered corporate world I had once inhabited, but in many ways it was infinitely more fulfilling. And through it all, the specter of Derek's legacy faded, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere footnote in the story of our lives. We had survived his reign of terror, emerging from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was excited to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because now, we were free to chart our own course, to write our own story, and to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.